Welcome. Thank you. And first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. This is just so exciting for me to get to come visit new people and share this. And as some of you have already heard, this is actually my first time in your lovely state. So this is just a great experience. And I get to check off another state on my personal little map in my head of places that I have gone and converted people to the passion of gamification. So, so welcome today. Today we will be, as I said, re-envisioning gamification. Because I know some of you may have already used it, some of you may not. Some of you may have some very concrete definitions of what it means to you. Some of you may be a little fuzzier. So we're gonna deal with that all today. In case you did not hear, my name is Valerie, but I answer pretty much anything. Hi, welcome.
Hi.
Come on in. And I just want to acknowledge this is being recorded, and so it's going to be a little weird for those of you watching it later because we will be doing a lot of activities. So there may be some time in the video where people are just kind of look like they're hungered, and you can fast forward through those words. But yes. Oh, what's this?
It was a real test. You go away to fast forward.
All right, so if you have not already, you do have a little card in front of you that has 4 items to fill out on it, and I think most people have already completed it. And, oh, I had no idea. Got the M's over here. Wow, that is really unusual. Yeah. All right, so we've got your name. I want you to just think about what would be something that would be worthwhile for you. And for some of you, this is a repeat, but those who were not, who were not here personally, I just want them to know what we did. So I'm kind of talking through this again. So we did think about, by the end of the day, what would be something that would make this really worthwhile for you? What are you looking to get out of this? All of you came here with probably slightly different expectations. So we want to acknowledge that. And that's going to be part of my challenge today. Because part of my challenge, because I have to make everything somewhat game-like, is I'm going to be checking out what you all wrote, and I'm going to see how many of those I can hit. Okay, so I can't promise to do 100%, but I'm going to shoot for 100%, because I'm just a little competitive like that. Then on the other side of your card, I had you pick a very vague number between 1 and 40. And I'll explain what we're going to do with that later. And then you also had an opportunity to say, what are you going to do today to make this a great learning experience for you and for your fellow participants? Okay? So is anybody, because I know there's not a lot of shy people in here, is there anybody who might want to share what they are looking for, to what their thing was, that they'll be happy if they get by the end of the day, and what they are going to do to make it a good learning experience? Does anybody want to share? Now they get quiet.
Yeah, I want to get more ideas to get the students involved.
Okay.
To bring them out of the show.
Right, so you're looking for ideas, and what are you planning to do today, besides head the trouble table? What do you
have fun.
Have fun, okay, I like that one, I like that one. Does anybody else want to share maybe what they were looking for?
I just want to learn more about gamification so that I can take it back to my team. I had a lot of people in my program that wanted to come and couldn't.
Okay.
So
that's great.
My goal for today is to be able to pass on the information.
So you will be a champion.
So.
You'll be the champion. Okay.
She's good at that.
So I assume that what you'll be doing today is you will be sucking in every bit of knowledge.
Yes,
so that
osmosis is great.
Yes. But as I said, feel free, write in the booklets. Those are yours. Those are yours. I will also make sure that, I'm sure Elaine will help me, that we get distributed electronic copies of both the workbooks that are in front of you right now, as well as the slide deck. All right, so you'll have all of that. All right. Anybody need more time? Looks like all the 10 cards are up. We're good. Okay. All right. So Elaine helped me get a little bit acclimated, but she doesn't realize this, but I had an inside source. So I got a little more information about what goes on here from Louie. So, yay. So Louie and I were chatting about the university and what would be best for me to do while we were here. And he turned me on to this video. Oops, he turned me on to this video, which I think because I'm doing it this way, am I going to mess everything up if I? Okay. We're doing a little advanced technology here, so. We're not going to play. I am not going to worry about it not playing. He may get it play or not. If this were playing, see, I love live television. If this were playing, it's actually a video from when they reintroduced the wolves into Yellowstone. Okay, so obviously Louis had a vested interest there. Not the same type of wolf, I understand that. But wolves, you know, they know each other. So anyway, but the point of the story of reintroducing the wolves into Yellowstone was that once the wolves went back in, various other things happened. So then the elk population changed. And then because it moved out of certain areas, certain trees came back. And then because the trees came back, other animals came back. So it was this whole beautiful rippling thing, which is trophic cascade, which is not technically what happened at Yellowstone, but I'm trying to be specific because I know I'm going to get nailed by my math group back here if I'm not. Real specific. That's okay if it doesn't apply, that's fine. So the point was, he wanted me to check out the video because wolves are cool. But he also said, you know, I think this is important. I think this might be something you can use in your class because that's really kind of what we're shooting for here. We're looking today. I loved your answer. We're looking today for those little ideas that we can, little seeds that we can go back and we can plant and we can see what happens. Because a lot of this with gamification requires some experimentation. It is not a one and done situation, okay? There's not a perfect answer. There is not a perfect collection of answers even. Each one of you in this room today could leave here, go back, gamify your classes or not. We'll talk about that too. It doesn't always require gamification, but you may take some of the ideas out of it and create something that doesn't even look like a game or gamification, but it's still helpful. We'll still take those little nuggets and plant those seeds and watch what happens. So that's part of my goal today, is to give you some of those examples, some of those ideas, and then you translate them into how do they fit in my world? How can I make this look in my world? And each one of you could end up with a solution that looks completely different from anything I described today, completely different from anything that any of the rest of the people in this room do, and they could all be perfect. They could be perfect for your particular courses, your particular students. And that's one of the main things we need to think about, all right? And please, at any point today, stop, holler, ask me things, talk to me. First thing I just want, you just hold up fingers. We're not even going to use technology today. I could have used Kahoot or something here, but I wanted to go real low tech today. So just holding up fingers. How do we feel about gamification starting today? I see some ones. I see some fours. I love the fours. I see some threes. Game of what? Yeah. Okay.
What is
some
four?
Three. Sorry, four is lolcats. Yeah, that's kind of that's. She's like.
Sure.
Sure, we'll go with that. We'll go with that, and I'll explain why I have that answer on there. Good. Okay, so I did not see any twos. So either people are really shy and they don't want to admit that they hate it, or they hate it so much they didn't come today. That would probably be. So that's good. It looks like we got a nice mixture of I saw a couple of ones, I saw several threes, and that's okay. That's okay. We're gonna catch you up to speed on Game of What. And then I always throw, not always, but I often throw lolcats or something like that in there because this is one of the elements we're going to talk about is surprise and fun. The brain loves novelty. The brain loves to be surprised. So when you're reading through this, you know, how many Likert scale things do I have? I strongly agree, I disagree. What? It doesn't always have to be that way, okay? Maybe if it's a formal assessment and, you know, there's a grant or something involved. But Elaine did not tell me that because there was a grant involved that I had to be formal, so. So we're gonna have a little fun today, all right? So keep that in mind. You don't always, everything doesn't have to be real stuffy. But I also just wanted to get an idea of where people were. All right, so just to start, because I know we like definitions, right? To university, I have to stop for a second. Okay, so this is a definition. it is not the only definition. Gamification is a very new, fuzzy topic, okay? A lot of people think it means a lot of different things. I can't tell them they're right or wrong. I will tell you that I think this is a good definition for us to work from today. So, I think if we start with the idea that it's the use of game design techniques, game thinking, and game mechanics to enhance non-game, keyword there, non-game context, okay? I think we're in a good place if we start there. And the reason I like this definition is it does acknowledge that gamification does spring out of, in large part, the gaming world. Game design, game thinking, which game thinking really has been sort of taken over in the design community as a whole, as being this sort of iterative process of, design, not I make something, it's done, and I never have to think about it again. So, game thinking is big in a lot of fields right now. And the whole idea of non-game context, well, obviously, education should be fun. There's no reason we can't. It's, we all think it's fun. We love what we do, right? So we think it's fun. But non-game context, and that's important because everything in gamification is not, in my world, everything is not about making a game. I'm not going to teach you how to make games today. I hope you're not disappointed.
These are game guys.
I was going to ask if anybody was going to come because I know you all have a game group. So I'm glad you're here. I love games, don't get me wrong. And games, we'll talk about games are sometimes a great solution to the problem. But I'm going to show you how playing games can fit into this larger sort of solution that we're going to talk about. So games, if you think gamification means I have to play games, okay, as long as it's going to, fit the needs of your students, as long as it fits into what you're trying to do. I will tell you, just because, again, I have my special university disclaimers. One of the key problems with using games in a university setting is accessibility. Games, by default, do not worry about game designers. Generally, there are a few companies now that are, and you probably can speak to this more than I can. There's a few game companies I know that are really reaching out and making more effort to make things more accessible in different ways, but games themselves are not generally designed to be accessible. So I know that's often a big concern, and so that can be a drawback to using them. Okay, that doesn't mean you can't use them in other ways, and that's some of the things we're going to talk about today. All right, so I always like this quote because, again, this kind of speaks to the spirit of what I'm suggesting. We're not going to make games, we're going to make games work for us. We're going to think about why are games so popular? Why do they work? Why do people play them for hours and days? And how can we make that, the students sitting there for hours, we want the students to do that, right? So this sort of gets to the spirit of what we're saying. All right, so in my world, this is what gamification looks like. It comes not just from the game design world. It comes from a whole host of places. So gamification to me is a much larger topic than the little topic, not little topic, but the large topic of games, but it's even bigger. So I listed a few. These are not even all of them that I could think of, but things like neuroscience, so cognitive science, thinking about how people learn, how people think. Behavioral things, usability. A lot of things in games are, I have this one game I've stopped playing, I've weaned myself finally. And I wrote about it on my blog because the only reason I kept playing it was I thought it was really pretty. I liked looking at it. It satisfied that need of aesthetic. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm gonna pick on a few things a little later that I think as a whole, as a group, as educators, we could do better in terms of aesthetics. So again, just a long list here. Learning analytics. Really, learning analytics to me is the back end of gamification. Gamification is what you use to get the users engaged to do things, which are then captured by the computer and spit out the other end as analytics, right? Okay, so there's a lot of things here. Gamification can have a lot of little spin-offs here. So that's what gamification looks like to me. And this was my really feeble attempt when I started. I was like, okay, I'm going to make a Venn diagram that like shows the overlap. And I was like, it's a spirograph. It's not even like there's no Venn diagram that'll do this. So I just.
And none of them meet in the middle, apparently.
Sorry?
None of them meet in the middle.
None of them necessarily meet in the middle. That's kind of my brain in the middle. Yeah, it's all kind of there, but not entirely. So anyway, so these are, and you can add to that list. That's not an all-inclusive list. Okay, but so by now, as you've probably caught on, this is not going to be a traditional sort of PowerPoint slide with bullet points. I think I have 2 bullet point slides in there, and that's something that I do intentionally because I like to model what I'm going to suggest some of you could do better. And I'm not picking on you individually because I have no idea. Although I did look at some of your syllabuses. That was very nice of you to have them online. That was awesome. That's a rare opportunity. That's a rare opportunity for me to get to go to the website and actually take a peek at some of them. But this, I don't want to talk a lot about me because it's not about me today. It's about all of you. It's about you getting what you need today. But just so you kind of understand where I'm coming from for this, I have sort of 2 guiding learning principles. The one on the left, does anybody know what this symbol is? Is that any Japanese speakers? Because sometimes, you know, I never know. I get in a room and somebody says, yeah, that's not technically, like, there should be a little more to that law. I don't know. This is the symbol for the word Kaizen. Okay? Kaizen means continual improvement. And it comes from the business world primarily. It was used by Japanese businesses. They kind of took it from American business and they perfected it a little more. And so what it means is we don't always have to wait for something to be broken. We should always be looking at things and thinking about how they could be improved. What's next? And then what? How can we do this a little better? How can we change this? So I can tell you with absolute certainty, if I look like I go to a slide and I look a little surprised, I may be. Because this is the first time this slide deck has ever been presented. Because every time I go to a new group, I think about who are they? What do they need? It's going to be slightly different than the last one. What did I learn from the last one? Constantly improving, okay? So I'm speaking here both to us as those who are preparing things and our students. We're going to talk a lot about today the importance of progress and making progress, okay? I know grades, got it, okay. I've heard it all. I know they want their grades. I get it, okay. We're gonna go a little bigger than that today. We're gonna think bigger than that. All right. And on the right, I took my little squiggly picture, and this is my other piece. The learner is always at the middle of my concerns, okay. I'm never concerned with, oh my God, I have these 5,000 slides that I have to dump all of this information out there and, you know, I'm on top of my learners. Like, do they need all of that? How are they going to perceive that? How does that work for them? Like, they have to be at the middle of everything. So I start with those 2 sort of guiding principles, just so you kind of get where I'm coming from. So anybody who has any questions or comments, because when people start to get too quiet, makes me nervous. Nobody. Suddenly they got quiet on me. It's okay, I'm gonna get you talking, don't you worry. Because right now, we got an activity. All right, this activity actually is in your workbook if you want to read the full. And I'm gonna consult my little handy dandy notes because I don't memorize all the page numbers. It's on page 4. So you have your choice here. You're gonna choose to do one of these. You're either going to create a 6-word memoir, okay? Or you're going to come up with a story that you can share with others about your favorite game, why they should come play it with you. What game do you really like? And, you know, maybe if you want to be really clever, you don't even include the name of the game in it. You sort of describe, like, oh, this is like, you know, I think I gave you the example in the book, you know, oh my God, I got invited to this house and there was a murder and I need your help and, you know, would you come play this game with me and whatever. Okay, so take a couple of minutes in your heads and think and decide which one you want to do. You either want to do the 6-word memoir or you want to do the, you're gonna describe your favorite game or you know, a game you really like to somebody else. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. What we have displayed here is enough chaos there, you see. So, it was messy, it was ugly. It's okay. It didn't care. Halfway through, like, oh, should be one, should be, people talked to each other, people laughed, people were engaged, people were doing something, right? It wasn't the worst experience of your life, probably, hopefully. Totally wasn't terrible. Now, just out of curiosity, I've heard some comments going around. Those of you, and I'm going to exclude my two little troublemakers back here. Those of you who chose to do the 6-word memoir, why did you choose that one and not the other one?
Because it had less words.
Because it had less work. Oh, it seemed like less work. This sounds familiar. I've heard this. I've heard students say that. Oh, that one seemed like less work. Yeah, I picked that.
You know, it's not necessarily
But it's not
easier.
That's right.
It just seems easier because it has fewer words.
That's right, and that's part of the trick there. That one actually requires a little more creativity in some ways because I got to narrow it down to 6 words. 6 words is hard to make it kind of make sense, and I mean, come with 6 random words, but you know, to try to make it into a real story. That is kind of tricky. Okay, and those of you who picked favorite games, I heard some really cool ones. Anybody want to share a game that they did?
Well, I picked it mainly because the first one sounded way harder than the second.
And you're the game guy.
Yeah, I could rattle off about a game all at once. I mean, if you want me to read the story.
Sure, tell us the story. We don't have to read it. Tell us the story. It's
Okay.
personal. You like this one. I know you do. That's why you picked it.
I'm Jonathan, and we're going to go on a diving quest. On this diving quest, we're going to be rescuing sea creatures, go cave diving, and even go back in time to prevent a worldwide calamity.
Now, doesn't that sound awesome? Wouldn't you rather take that class? Right? Right? How do we describe our classes? Well, in this class, we're going to learn how to analyze the. Really? That was cool. Like, I want to go take that class. Right? Story. Both of these at their heart are about story. I don't care what game you picked. I mean, I'm glad you had one and you really enjoyed it, and I could see the smiles, I could see the laughs. You were having fun, you were engaging, you got to even talk to some people. And this one's really fun. Most of you seem to know each other a little more. A lot of settings I go to, a lot of the people don't. This is a nice way to they find something that maybe they have in common, nice little sort of icebreaker sort of thing. And we'll also talk about, I ask you to choose one because this is a topic we're going to come back to later, of autonomy. Giving students multiple ways to get where they're going is extremely engaging and powerful. Giving them some control about how they do the assignment, which assignment they do, those sort of things can be very, very powerful. And I'm sorry, I kind of uprooted you if you want to go back to your seat later. So anyway, there were a lot of little hidden things in this little seemingly simple activity. So as I said, both of these ultimately were about story. And that's the first thing we're going to talk about today is story, before we get into the nuts and bolts of game elements and all that kind of stuff. But really, story is how we experience things, right? And we can experience things, virtually through other people. When we hear a story, our brain treats it like it's happening to us. The same brain activity happens. I don't know if I have any science neuro people in here, but your brain will react the same way. I always check, because sometimes they get particular about their topics. And well, that's not exactly true. I'm like, okay, close enough. But the power of story and thinking about how you can make what you're presenting to the students more story-like. Is there a story behind it? Can you create a story around it? Anything that leads them. Stories have rises and falls, they have twists, they have turns. They keep our attention. Often stories, back in the 80s particularly, long ago in the dark ages of the 80s, they had series of books that were choose your own adventure. books. I don't know if I see some nods. Some of you know what I'm talking about, right? You'd read the story, and then you'd get to something, and it would say, go to page 27. And you'd find out what happened in the story. So every time you read the book, it could be different, right? Choose your own adventure. And that goes back to that idea of where in your class can you let students choose their own adventure? Because it really is their adventure. The class is their adventure. You know all this stuff, right? You know all the material. So what can you do to help them to make their own story? And the other thing that I love about games and story is how many times when you're playing a game, you're really into the game, you're, oh, I really have to stop and check my email now. Nobody does that, right? Oh, there might be an important email waiting for me. No. Games demand our attention. They're stories on steroids because I'm in the story. I am the story. I am part of the story. I am controlling the story by virtue of what I do in the game. So they demand my attention, right? So much of our learning is so passive. How can I take the learning from being a passive to putting the learner right in there? Make them be in there. Oh my God, they have to save the world. They have to, the sea turtles need me, or, whatever. And we'll talk about that later. Actually, that is a very powerful thing. People react extremely powerfully to characters. If there's a character, if I have, there's a professor, we'll talk about it here. This is obviously a little dollhouse. Literature class. Different rooms as they were going through. This is not exactly the diagram they used because it's in their university system and I can't use that. But it was this same idea. As they went through this course, it was like a Gothic literature course. And as they went through the different rooms, there was a character that they were talking to in the syllabus, in the instructions. They were helping this character find things. Maybe there were things hidden in the rooms, and then the different rooms had themes that corresponded to the different lessons, the different things they were reading, right? So we're putting a story around it, okay? It's not distracting from the learning. We never want to create something that's this extra layer of complexity just for the sake of like, oh, I'm playing a game now. Okay, it's fun because I'm playing a game, right? It's still learning first. The learning has to come first. But can I wrap it? Can I package it somehow so that it's immersive? I'm more immersed in the activities. And so this was very clever. The way they did it was very clever. And so each week when they went into, I can't remember if they used Blackboard. I know you all use Blackboard. Can't remember if they used Blackboard or not, but all of them pretty much can do similar things. But they had a banner at the top when you went into week one. It wasn't just text. They had a nice banner that immersed the student. Okay, I'm in this room. So now I know where I am. It also gives me visual clues as to where I am. It gives me context. Story is very important because it gives me context. It allows me to take information and make sense of it in different ways. So adding some visuals. So when I say story, that doesn't preclude visuals. It can be a picture book, right? So I thought this was a very clever sort of, thing. Now, did everybody in the class love the Dollhouse? Probably not. Does everybody love every class that you teach the way you teach it now? Sorry to let you in on that. But, you're never going to please everybody, okay? But this sort of thing really does. It gets the brain. It connects things in a different way. Because now they have visuals. I have a theme. I'm immersed in the story. And like I said, there was a character in this. And when there's a character involved, I have a social bond with that character. I know the character's not real. I know they're in the computer. I know they don't exist. But I do. I start to feel responsible. And that's a unique thing to games. That is a very unique feature of games. Actually, I won't go there yet. There's a book, and I put it in your resources, that talks about the emotion of games. And there's been a lot of studies with avatars and things like that. And they really do change how people perceive and interact with the learning and things like that. All right, here's where I get in trouble. I just put it up front because I may as well get in trouble right at the beginning, right? All right, this is not one of your syllabuses, but it is. You don't need to be able to read what's on this. You know from a distance of 67 yards what that is, right? You can tell what that is. That is your typical. How interested am I in taking this class? This is your first introduction to the student, your first 2 introductions. If it's a classroom setting or online, doesn't matter. Your first 2 introductions with your student is your syllabus and probably some sort of introductory exercise. Oh, week 1 module. I bet I could go into half of the online courses in Blackboard across this country right now, open up week 1's module, and what am I going to say?
Introduction.
Introduction. Please tell the class about yourself. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, if I'm a freshman and this is the first time I've ever seen that, I might be okay. If I'm a, 4th, 5th, 6th class and I'm doing this same activity, how do I feel about it? I copy and paste it. I have completely checked out. There's no thought to it at that point. I have completely checked out of the whole process. I'm putting the same thing I put in the 27 other places that somebody asked me the same question. Okay? Those are your first 2 opportunities to connect with your student, and we miss them. We miss them consistently. I see very few people, I hate to say it, some of you are probably perfect. I didn't get a chance to see all of yours. Some of you are probably perfect. I always feel like I'm picking, I start to get a few people, I look around the room and I start to see a few people start to kind of go. I'm like, yours is probably fine, I don't know. Again, we're back to Kaizen. Could we make it a little better? That's all I'm asking.
My department writes mine and it's 7 pages long and I have no control over it.
Okay, I was going to address that. Sometimes you have limited control, and that's an important point she made. Sometimes you do not have a lot of control, particularly over the structure. There's templates, there's things like that. But we can work around that. There's always a way around it.
Oh, yeah.
There's always a way around it. But my point here is find those opportunities. You have 2 golden opportunities when you meet those students. How are you going to have them interact with one another and with you in that introduction? How can it be something better than just, tell me about yourself? Yeah, introduce yourself to the class. Whatever. Same thing with the syllabus. I know syllabuses are often taboo, but I'm going to go there anyway. If you have the opportunity, this was a history, this is actually a syllabus of a history class, and it's posted publicly, so I can share this one. And the link is in your workbook. It's Tona Hagen's syllabus, and what she did was said, you know what, this is not engaging my students. History is interesting, it's stories, it's about us, it's whatever. So here's what she did. She went and found probably somebody in her graphic department. I'm sure you can find yourself a student that can help you out with this. And look, it's got pictures. Ooh. It's laid out in such a way that it's, and again, I know you can't read this from where you are, but I'll give you some highlights. She's got different categories over here. Wading, snorkeling, and scuba diving. How deep a dive do you want to take into these topics? That's a very clever one. So she's got these sort of levels built in to the expectations here. She's still got all the usual stuff, the course requirements, her office hours. She's still got all those pieces. But if I'm a student and I'm coming in on day 1, and maybe this is a required class. I gotta take history. I'm not really a history buff. This at least kind of goes, ooh, my brain kind of goes, hey, maybe this one's different, and that wakes you up a little bit. Different wakes the brain up. There's one time that your brain stops, literally, the functioning in your brain for a very tiny nanosecond stops. Sorry, sneeze. Yeah, okay, 2. Yeah, he's right. One cognitive place, and that is surprise. When your brain encounters something unexpected. And if I'm a student and I open this, that's unexpected. I can guarantee you that is unexpected. And that is unexpected. The brain really does. It kind of, for a brief little blip, it stops. And then it kind of goes, okay, I got to figure this out. Where does this go? I got to map this to all those schema that I already know. This is new, this is different. And so that's one of the reasons it works. But also just because it immerses, again, we're back to this, it's starting to immerse the student in the topic. When I go, I'm taking several different classes, and I open up all the syllabuses, and they look the same. I open this one up, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'm in the zone, I'm back in the game. So it's just something to think about. Now again, sometimes they're very locked down. Now, does that prevent me from having another one-page document that I give my students on day one that looks like this? No, it does not. So there's always a way around it. And then in that one-page document, you can refer to the syllabus and say, okay, all the details, you still got to go look at all the details and slog through that. What, you said 7 pages? Oh, bless you. Bless you. I think one of my last grad school courses, the syllabus was 47 pages long.
Wow.
So, and it's useless. It's useless because it was all the policy. I know it's got to be in there. Bless you. I know it's got to be in there. But by the time they finished, and then of course it was copy and pasted from several different documents. The fonts didn't even match, which made my design spider senses. So, sorry, aesthetics matter. They do. Trust me on this one. They do. So anyway, I have beaten up on the syllabus enough. I am going to move on from that traumatic experience that I had. Yeah, in fact, it was 47 pages. All right. So, finishing up a couple of more things about story. I know that you all want statistics, right? You want proof that this works. Well, guess what? This example comes from a journalism professor in New York City. His name is Adam Penningberg, and teaches at NYU. And what he did was a little experiment. Now, I probably shouldn't have given you numbers right up front because you're probably looking at it going 51 to 59. But let's talk about this for a minute. What he did was he took, now these were graduate students, but he took these students and he took them down to Wall Street and they went on a scavenger hunt. Okay? So there was a story and they had a guide that took them around and they had fun. It was a mobile device that had the questions. Okay, so they were broken up into teams. They're down on Wall Street. They're getting the story. Then they got their team. They got to vote, which the answer is, find the objects, all that kind of stuff. So very interactive. We're now immersed in the stuff. We're covering all those things we've talked about. So they go down there and they do this and they do the treasure hunt. Okay, so that's week 1, we'll say, of the class. Okay, week 2 of the class, they come in to the classroom. They sit down and they read, it's about 1 page, it wasn't very long, about a page, maybe 2 pages of information. Similar, related topic, not the same, but related information. They get to read through it a few times, not rushing them. They got time, read through it. Then he gave them a quiz. Okay, now, the material that came directly from the material they had just read, which in theory, if we go back to, they should know it because I just said it. They scored 51.3 on the stuff they just read. Okay. Now we can make a judgment of whether that's good or bad, but that's not where we're going here. Same number of questions, same day, about the material from the scavenger hunt, 59.3. Now, is that impressive? You tell me. I see some. Yes, no, maybe. It's an 8%. That's an 8% difference. That's not bad, right? It's not like, oh my God, they scored 100%.
But it was a week ago versus 5
Thank
months ago.
you. Thank you. That's the point. A week later, they remembered a lot more. I would say that's a lot more. I'm sorry, 8% to me on something like that. It's significant. That's a significant difference. A week later, by a week later, they should have remembered what? Nothing. Right? They should have, basically, they should have been down here. We're way down here on the forgetting curve. Day 7, we are like off the chart almost. So we're way down here. Maybe 20% they would have remembered, you would expect. Okay, so let's say if I was on average supposed to remember 20%, and I remembered 59.3, that's impressive. That's a big jump. Okay, so that's the difference. Now we can say there were all sorts of mitigating factors and You know, this is not totally a scientific study. But it leads to something, and that is that the interactivity, the immersion, the story, it all worked. It engaged their brains at a deeper level than just sitting there passively reading the information. The other thing that's really interesting is, this is the average. Who do you think in the class scored the highest? There's a very specific group of people in the class that scored the highest. Take a guess who it was? The leaders of the teams. Why?
Because they were collecting all the information.
And what else were they doing?
Interviewing,
They had the phone. They had the phone. They were the ones that actually entered the answers. They scored the best across the board of all the teams, every team. They scored the best. The person that was putting the information in. That to me is something we need to look at. Okay. I know reading is important. I know sometimes that's the only way we got to give them some of the information. But really, anytime you can make it more interactive, anytime you can have them do something versus hear something or listen or whatever, it's about the doing. It's about the doing. It's about the person who was holding the phone. All right? Any questions, thoughts? I love the fact you're like leading it. You're like, but wait, but that, but what about? It's good. All right, so we talked about that. This last one I put in here because this is an example. This is a scenario-based learning thing. Now again, this is in that grayscale. Is that gamification? Is that a game? Is that a separate genre? Is that a separate? I don't care. Because you know what? I'm not a university professor and I don't have to care. I can say all of these are important. All right? I do. I know, like I said, I don't get too hung up with some of the definitional stuff. But this example, I've met the gentleman who runs the company that did this. And the link is in there if you want to actually play through it. It's a very short scenario-based thing. It takes about 10 minutes, maybe 8 to 10 minutes, whatever. But the reason I put it in here that I think is so interesting was, one, it talks about that whole idea of interacting with the information. This was a course that he did for the Army, for people who were going to be deployed to Afghanistan. This was actually the sort of pre-course to them coming into the classroom and taking, I think it was a 2-week training period or something like that. And so what they did was they very intentionally, and this is kind of odd, not odd, but it's somewhat unusual in terms of some of the learning that I've seen created for scenarios. Usually scenario-based learning is like, okay, I have a specific thing I need somebody to do, so I make a scenario and I let them role play with the computer, because nobody likes to role play in person, right? There's really nobody who likes to do that. But this one, they specifically targeted the affective domain. This is not a skills course. It is not a knowledge course. It is an affective domain course. They wanted people to come out of it with questions. They wanted people to be curious. They wanted them to be uncomfortable. I know, but wow, they wanted students to not be comfy. No, they wanted them to be a little bit uncomfortable so they would be prepared to pay attention to that very important information they were going to give them in that classroom. I mean, that was life and death. You know, your classes may not be life and death. This was life and death. This was very serious stuff. So I encourage you to take a look at it. It's a really nice example of a quick little scenario thing. But I mentioned it here, like I said, for the 2 reasons. One is it does give you a nice sort of interesting idea of how you could use story, graphics, interaction, but also I just think the fact that it's really targeting a different it's a very different approach. It's not teaching them. I mean, they do learn things in the course of this. But the really nice thing about this was, and I don't have the statistics. I meant to email him, and I ran out of time. But he had the statistics on how much playthrough there was. Because let's be honest, how many times if you do an e-learning program, whether you're teaching it or taking it yourself, how many times do you go through it more than once? You're lucky if you go through it the first time. can get you through the first one. This one, people play through over and over because there were different endings. Well, maybe I didn't get the best answer. What do I need to say? Let me go back and try it again. That's the whole game thing. Games constantly are encouraging us to go back and try it again and learn. Games are, I'm not sure if I put the quote in here or not. I'm going to peek and see. No, I didn't. Yes, I did. I put Ralph Koster's fun is another word for learning. Ralph Koster also said that he came to see games, and he's a game designer. He came to see games as a deliberate practice machine. And they really are. And our learning can be structured that way, to deliberately encourage them to go back. So that's what I really like about that scenario, was that he actually, they did go back and they tested. They wanted to see how many people, and it wasn't just the people that didn't get the best answer that played through again. It was everybody. So maybe on the first try, maybe I'm just really good at this, and I got to the optimal answer. I think there were eight endings. There were 2 that are really good, because you're kind of there, you're talking to this guy who has, this gentleman he's a cannabis farmer. You're talking to him, and you want him to help you. That's what you're trying. You're trying to build some rapport and relation with the native population there. And 2 of the answers, he actually invites you back and says, "Okay, we can talk more. Like, you know, I'm on board. I might be on board with this." There's a couple of answers where you just get kicked out of the house. Like, it's so bad. And then there's a couple of them that are kind of in the middle. Like, he doesn't commit to anything, but maybe we can try again. Whatever. So, and people play through it, no matter which ending they got to. Even if they got to the correct, in quotes, the correct ending, they still went back because they wanted to see, well, why did that work? Why was that one better? What if I'd done this? Oh, that's where the wrong turn was. Don't want to do that. So, this is something to think about. All right, so, ta-da! We're going to move on. I'm not using foul language, I promise. But in our activity that we did at the beginning, there were 2 words that came up. We talked about story, but several of you said, well, I picked that activity, or I picked that as I walked around and heard you talking, because it was fun. Right? So WTF actually stands for where's the fun? I know, I don't have the needles there. So it's okay. Fun is an okay word. Really, it is. Even in the land of my syllabus has to be 7 pages and it's predetermined that whatever. There, at least as far as I know, I have not seen any policies to date that absolutely say everything has to be really boring and serious. Maybe there are. I don't know. I'm going to suggest, that's the little fine print. Well, I'm here to tell you, we're going to break down that wall. We're going to have some fun. Well, the where's the fun actually comes from another game designer. Because I think, as again, whether we're going to use games or not, there's a lot we can learn from them. Because really, what do game designers design for? Or they design, well, besides money, I know, I sometimes get that to sell games. Okay, I got that.
But how do they sell it?
It's better be fun first.
It better be fun, right? If the game's not interesting, enjoyable, and when I use the word fun, I will qualify it, because I know we have to be somewhat serious. This is education. Fun could, okay, I could say engagement. I could say interesting. I could say exciting. Use whatever word you want. So I'm going to use fun because it's just an easy word. So, fun. And honestly, it was interesting. There's not been a lot of hard research done with adult learning and fun. There's a lot with kids, right? We got to make it fun. But then, like, you know, it's like, oh, now we're adults. No more fun. Sorry, too bad. But there are a few studies, and there was a really interesting study in Australia, and they talk about that you know, maybe we do use different words. Maybe fun is not, you know, get your thesaurus, use whatever word you want to use. But what was interesting, what came out of it, one of the interesting quotes, because part of it was surveys and things, and one of the people said, when something's fun, I'm willing to give it a go. And isn't that really, that's like a big hurdle sometimes in some classes. Just give it a go. Like, they're so convinced. When you start playing a game, and if I ever say anything wrong about games, you're going to correct me. When you're playing a game, you have an expectation on some level that you can win. That you can play. That you'll be able to participate, you'll be able to play. You don't approach a game going, well, there's no way to do this. I mean, you know, like I'm a lousy chess player. I don't expect to win necessarily, but I can expect to learn, I can expect to play, you know, getting to a win state, maybe not, but it's winnable by someone if they know how to play. But how many times do we have students, I've had students, like, they kind of walk in day one and they're like, there's no way I'm going to do this. They don't. There's no way I can do this.
So is fun the same for everybody?
No, it's not. It's absolutely not. She's on to my next slide. I think it's time to move on. This is a diagram which also is in your books. I just put up the actual diagram. This is from Nicole Lazaro. And she has spent decades studying fun in game design because she's a game designer. And she breaks it down into 4 parts. And what she talks about is fun is not the same for everybody. And that's an important notion that we need to keep in mind. So she starts at the top and she calls it hard fun. And that's mastery. That's I'm doing something because I want to get better at it, right? It can be hard. It can be really challenging. That's okay. It's okay for people. People like to be challenged. It's actually a huge myth that everybody wants everything to be easy. They really don't. If they're engaged in something, if they're interested in something, if you take somebody who really wants to do something, it does not matter how hard it is. They will find a way. Okay? And learning is one of those ways, and us being able to make a pathway for them is a way. But hard fun, yeah, I'm so glad. See, it's like I don't even need to remember my slides because y'all are just like knowing what I'm going to say. There's also easy fun. Sometimes we do, right? How many of you have, you got some games on your phone and got a few minutes and you just want to zone out a little bit? Yeah. What you got on your phone right now? I know you have Candy Crush.
I also have Toy Blast.
I played Toy Blast for a while. I weaned myself. I have to keep testing, which we're going to talk about later. I actually do play games for research. Serious stuff here. No, that's how we're going to get some of our ideas. That's how I'm going to show you. We're talking about that. So anyway, so yeah, sure. There's easy fun, and in here, I would also lump in here a lot of the creativity and self-expression stuff. Okay, people like to express themselves. I mean, games. The first thing you do in a lot of games is create your avatar, and you get to pick a name, and they want to make it personal. They want to get you in there. Down here we got serious fun. Okay, which is different than hard fun. Serious fun is more about the meaning, the value of it. All right, and then you have people fun. Right. Some of you, when you were describing your games, you probably picked the game that you picked because you're like, because I get to play with my friends. Okay. Now some of us, not me. I'm like the lone. I am like the one person probably that played World of Warcraft for years and never joined a guild, never wanted to talk to anybody. I was just like, I just want to play the game because I'm like doing something. And people would send me requests and I'd be like, I'm really sorry. Just passing through. Just passing through. So that's where I am. But I get it. I get that a lot of people, that's something that they really like. So this is how she breaks it up. So again, we're starting with this notion of that there's different ways to have fun. Okay? Just like different people learn differently and people, like different things. Fun is just an aspect of us. So, not surprising. Now, Mark LeBlanc, another game designer, he came up with 8 because he was not going to be outdone by Nicole's 4. And you're going to start to see some common themes and words here, right? So he's talking about discovery and expression. That's in the easy fun stuff. Challenge. There's your mastery. People like to be challenged. Fellowship, the social. So a lot of these. But the 2 I want to talk about because they're a little bit different than what we might expect. First one being fantasy. Now fantasy we sometimes think of as being elves, right? we're in this like magical kingdom and you know whatever. But fantasy really is just when we're imagining things that are not here, right? So it doesn't have to be elves or fairies. It could be serious things. It could be other things. And so the mind does amazing things. And one of the things that I think is really interesting with fantasy, there's been a lot of research done about sort of framing and priming people for different things. To get, I don't know if I have any psychology people in here. No. So in terms of like priming you for a topic or for information or whatever. So one of the studies that was really interesting, to me anyway, was they took 3 groups of people and they brought them into a room, and the first group they brought in, and they had this coat hanging on a hook, or like a coat rack kind of thing. It was just hanging there. And then they asked them to sit down at the table, and they gave them a little, remember the highlights magazines for kids? And they always had those little activities, find the difference, the 2 pictures, and kind of, everybody's smiling, yeah. So they gave them a test similar to that. Find the difference, 2 pictures, find the difference. So they gave it to the first group and they tallied those up. Then they brought the second group in and they asked them to put on this artist smock and to take the test. So they sat there. Okay. Then the third group, when they came in, they asked them to put on the doctor's coat. So then they sat down and they took the test. Okay. Now, when the results came in, which group scored the highest? Doctors. Why? Why doctors?
Because they're well educated and look for things.
But these were just random people.
But they made them feel that way.
We made them feel that way. Okay, we made them feel like they were smarter. And the artists, they're not.
Flighty.
Yeah, they're flighty. They're not real smart, right? No, but this was what this is the fascinating part about it. That completely subconsciously, they did not, it's the same coat, right? It's the same coat. There's nothing magical about that coat, putting the coat on. But they told them it was different things. And that control group, of course, they didn't tell them what the coat, there's a coat hanging there. They could look at it and think whatever they wanted to think. And that was their control group. So fantasy is an interesting concept in terms of putting your learners in a place that gets them in the right mindset. So a lot of, with children particularly, but they now suggest, don't tell them that we're going to think about history. We're going to be historians. How does a historian do? How does a historian? They thought they were doctors. Suddenly they were smarter. Sometimes, and these things sound so silly sometimes, but anything you can do to create this environment. When you come into this class, whether it's online or in person or whatever, you're creating this space that's about learning math. I'm a mathematician when I'm in your class. Whoa, that's right. Okay, so anything, just looking for those opportunities. And again, every one of these examples is not going to be applicable to every one of your situations. But these are all just things to perhaps consider. And you can leave here and go, wow, she must have had on that white coat. They told her she had the artist coat on. All right. So going back to the eight types of fun. Another one on there was narrative, and we talked a lot earlier about story. But I want to mention before we leave that topic, narrative does not necessarily mean the story. It means how things unfold. What is the progression of things, and how do I get from this place to this place? So everything does not have to have a story. Maybe it has a theme. Maybe it has, some sort of common elements that kind of move me through. Some of this gets a little bit into the aesthetic even. Just, visually, okay, I can see where I'm supposed to go next, that sort of thing. So narrative, just think of it as the progression, not just a story. All right. Oops. And then before I leave fun, yet again, not to be outdone, Marguerite Dibble has 10 types of fun. But I put her on here because actually I included the link to her TED Talk. She has a couple, and again, she's a game designer. She has a couple on there that are kind of interesting, and she actually takes things, she does an analysis in the video of like World of Warcraft, and talks about like, how much of these different elements does it have, and how can we play with the percentage of this or that. So like cooperation and competition, people think, and this is an interesting one, we're going to get into this when we talk about points, badges, and leaderboards. Competition is not engaging to people on a whole. It is really not. I know we think it is. It tends to be, and they've actually studied, the amount of lift you get for those that it helps is more than offset by the demotivating factors. And even the people that are motivated by it are not, you're not getting the lift you think you are, usually. There's some exceptions, like if I was teaching at the law firm with the attorneys, because we're all so they practically beat anybody up. So anyway, but the two I want to talk about here, the first one particularly, because I think it's a word that gets misused and misinterpreted sometimes, is reward. So when she's talking about reward, and again, going back to psychology, I take an action, I expect a reaction. If I don't get one, my brain goes, right? If I get a reaction, my brain stays awake. This is feedback, right? So anything we can do to shorten, compress the latency between action and feedback will be helpful. And particularly if you have introductory courses where there is a lot of necessity to get knowledge, information pumped into them, the longer you let them linger with uncertainty or perhaps misunderstanding, bad information, the longer that stays in there, the more likely it is to stick. So the more quickly we can check in. How are we doing? Did we get that? Let's check and see if we got that. How are we going to check to see if we got that? And it doesn't always have to be a quiz. And it certainly does not always have to be a quiz that is graded. It can be a self-check sort of thing. In fact, there's a good study from, it's been done in a few places, but the Japanese study was the last one I read, where the teacher had two classes, and in one class he did traditional quizzes. I think it was a math class, actually. Did traditional quizzes, teacher graded them, blah, 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 blah. The other class was the students self-monitored. They took the quizzes, but teachers didn't check them, wasn't toward the grade, it was just for them. The group that had the self-checks scored much higher on the final exam and on the overall performance than those who had been quizzed to death by the teacher. And some of that is just kind of common sense. I mean, I know I had certain topics that maybe I couldn't learn them on the teacher's time frame. Maybe they needed me to learn it in week 1, but it took me to week 3 to get it. So if I could self-check, I could, I still don't get that. But then by the time I got to the high pressure, high risk, we'll say, I had these little low risk tests that I could self-monitor, and then I get to the high risk test, I could do better because I always had more exposure to it. I had more go-arounds, more times that I can get exposed to and I can go through it, the better my chances are. So that's just something to think about with the reward aspect. The surprise aspect we've talked about, I've mentioned a couple of times how important surprise is. And again, don't underestimate just the little thing. Lolcats at the beginning. It was unexpected. It kind of meant, some of you kind of went, what? It kind of just woke you up a little bit. And it also adds some personality, because I can tell you, I was on a webinar this week actually, and the two big things that they talked about, one was the fact that none of the students buy the textbooks. That was fascinating, which I didn't have the numbers for until this week. It's big. They don't read the text, they don't buy the textbooks, or at least not to the last minute. But the other thing was, your students desperately want you to be passionate about the subject. They don't. I know. I've been there. I used to teach Microsoft Office, okay? Real thrilling stuff. I taught people how to use Microsoft Word. I did the same class hundreds of times. But guess what? It was the first time the students had heard it. I had to be as passionate about it, oh yeah, styles are rocking. Like, you know, it just, they need you to be passionate about it. They need you to be engaged. So as much as we talk about, well, the students are engaged, we just have to self-check sometimes to go, yeah, I know I've taught this class for, oh my God, I've taught it so many times. But that again, to me, that's one of those reasons that I never teach the same class twice, because it keeps me on my toes too, because that way there's something fresh, there's something new. But that's the surprise aspect. And then, again, challenge. Do not shy away from challenging your students at all. Jane McGonigal, because you have to kind of include Jane McGonigal if you're going to talk about games, said we'd rather be challenged than bored, and that is so true. The reason people stop playing, and I don't just mean games, stop playing, is quite often I figured it out. It's not interesting anymore, right? Does anybody past the age of about 5 play tic-tac-toe anymore? Right? Once you know, once you figure, and I heard you talk about your math game. Now, it's fun to you because you're sort of challenging other people. But right, once you figured it out, sort of the magic, like, okay, I can win this every time. That part of the fun sort of goes away. There may be other fun, like, oh, I get to teach it to somebody else, or, you know, I can use it somewhere else. But challenging, so that really is the thing. A lot of times when people check out, it's because, yeah, okay, I got that part. Or they think they got that part. Now, they may not have. But once the brain thinks they got it, they're kind of, well, this isn't interesting anymore. I'm done. Okay. All right. Finally, because I'm talking about fun, I have to talk about the serious side. Tyler DeWitt is an MIT doctoral student, and he also teaches middle school science. He does a lot of YouTube videos, so if any of you are big YouTube fans, he does chemistry videos. But what I really liked was, and I included the link to his talk too, he talked about this tyranny of precision and cult of seriousness. And I get it. If you're talking to doctoral students about, something replicating, something very technical, you have to be precise. But consider your audience. You're talking to somebody who has dedicated their life at this point, if they're graduate students. They have some interest in that topic. Unless they're one of those poor kids that I'm going to medical school because mommy and daddy said I have to go to medical school. Generally speaking, if they get that far along in some area, they have an interest in it. You don't have as high of a bar to get them interested in it. But when you're talking about, underclassmen, people just starting out, people who are perhaps non-traditional students, you have a higher bar. And we have to consider that. What level of complexity really do they need to know? So, for example, he was teaching middle school kids, and they were learning about DNA and bacteria and things like that. And he's like, if they leave the class thinking that all bacteria have DNA, that's okay. It's not technically right. Okay? It's not technically right. And when he worked with textbook companies, they're, oh, you can't say that because, okay. But what's the harm in a student leaving the class thinking that there's DNA in bacteria versus the student leaving the class going, I hate science, I never want to study this ever again. Okay? So this is, at some level, we have to really balance out. So when I say make it fun, again, I am never ever suggesting to anybody, yes.
Okay, so the little mathematician
Yeah.
in me that likes precision is screaming. Because okay, I understand that maybe we don't want them to be completely precise in
Well, now,
understanding, but
a math formula,
I don't
yeah.
want them to be misled.
No, I don't want them to be misled either. But, and again, see, I always gotta get the one group thing. I couldn't have a group of nice, And
I teach mathematics, and there's a certain point, like I told the students, there was, when my nephew was 2 and he saw a picture of a wolf,
Mhm.
he called it the family dog. At that age, yay, he didn't
It's-
call it the family cat.
there you go.
There's
Close
a
enough.
certain point,
Yes.
like asymptotes drive me nuts because they say, oh, you can't cross an asymptote. Yeah, that's what I said. You can't cross an asymptote. It's like, yeah, you
Yeah,
can.
you can.
Yeah, you can. You can cross it lots of times. You can't cross a vertical asymptote, but you can cross the horizontal.
Yeah.
But what definition do they give you?
Right.
Approaches but never cross. And it's like, sure it does.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm
We do
totally
that.
with you. I'm totally with you. There are things we need to be precise about, but what I want you to think about is making sure that those things are the things that we It's the tyranny of serious part that I'm, yeah. It just, you know, making sure that it's appropriate to that level of, you know, that's really what, and, yeah. How am I presenting? Jeez. No, but you're absolutely, I'm with you.
To join Elaine,
Yes.
I'm an English professor, so I'm all about, oh yes, that's gonna.
And you want the commas in the right place.
Oxford comma, absolutely no.
Oxford, yes.
But one thing, precision and getting things precise can also be really fun.
Yes.
Can be part of that gameplay, and there are some things that are really kind of crucial,
Absolutely.
I think, to get right.
Absolutely.
And other things, it's true. I see a student, you know, I need to not be completely hyper, even about the comma, because quite frankly, I have some larger conceptual goals I want them to
There
be
you go.
achieving in writing
Yes.
sometimes. So,
Yes.
yes, both.
Yeah, and again, I agree. That's the thing. I am in total agreement with you. And I bring this, like I said, I bring this up only because I want to acknowledge, my big concern is that people, we don't want to drive the learner away, is sort of my concern. And that, yes, it's, we need to be serious about what we need to be serious about, but, you know, just everything, you know. And again, when I say have a little fun, again, it could be as simple as how many of you do like exit tickets at the end of your class, right? Do we do exit tickets or something like that? What kind of, lots of those. Okay, that's okay, you don't have to. You don't have to. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so some, both in the classroom or online. Sometimes at the end of the lesson, you just pop up like a one question thing or something that just kind of, let's just kind of see where you are, check in. Sometimes they're very vague, they're reflective. Sometimes they could be, I think you were using a more formative sort of a real
Right,
quiz,
that's normally
yeah.
how they're used.
Yeah. So it could be in different varieties. Again, that's what makes these classes so fun, because like there could be 27 different things, or and everybody's using them a little different. But yeah, it could be, we need to check in, which is, as I said, I'm big on that, like check in, don't let them linger with bad information. So yeah, I'm with you on the precision thing. Don't let them linger with bad stuff. But sometimes it can also be just sort of a way to impart your personality and their personality and connect with them. And so sometimes they're more reflective, and sometimes they can just be fun. They could even be like, okay, how are we doing with this? How do we feel about our understanding of asymptotes, or whatever, for after our lesson today, whatever. And you could put up a Padlet or something online, and you could let them submit their answers with funny GIFs. Little animated pictures or something. How do I feel about it? And somebody might, put up, like they're Beyonce, they're a rock star. I got it. Like it's great. Somebody else might, some really sad face. And there's places that you can find a little bit of the fun. All right, we're not gonna beat the precision horse to death. I think it's gone. And again, this was just another quick example. This is in that vein. This is from an app called Habit Bull. And I mention it here because we're going to talk about building good habits. Habit Bull, habit, H-A-B-I-T, Bull, B-U-L-L. It's an app that lets people set goals. So, I'm a student. I'm going to study my math 4 times a week. And so I put in there and I can set that as my goal. And then when I do it, I go in and I say I did it today, and I get my progress bars, and I, all that stuff. And I can set multiple ones and things like that. But the reason I mention it is, it actually has a setting that asks you, would you like funny notifications? So instead of sort of typical notifications of, oh, you didn't check in today, it'll send you, like the one it sent me that day was, ahoy, sharky shark. Like, they're silly, they're fun, but again, now I start to get curious. What's he gonna say tomorrow? It brings me back, because I'm curious. Leave your students with a question. Do you always end the class with an answer? Do you start your class with a question? Do you end your class with a question? Because the brain, this is another interesting thing about the brain. The brain likes completion. The brain does not like uncertainty. It does not like things to be unfinished. That is the nature of, well, not anymore, because now people binge watch TV, but used to be cliffhangers were a big thing. Because, why? You spent the whole off season wondering who shot JR, right? Because it was stuck in your head until it got resolved. Ending your class with a question is a really great way to make your students keep thinking. What did she mean by that? What? Oh, wait, how? Well, now I'm confused. And that's okay. Now I'm thinking about it. So, this little, again, all these things are just little things to think. Okay. All right. And then this was just a final sort of he who laughs most learns best. Just to wrap that up. All right. Time for a little pop quiz. I think I like quizzes.
42.
There you go.
That's the answer to everything.
That is the answer to everything. What?
So we weren't allowed to put 42 in here, obviously.
I know, I tried, but it said 6. And it says 140, so.
I know, that's the universal answer.
No, I completely barred you from the universal answer. All right. We're just going to shout them out. We don't have to be formal about this or anything. How many gameful elements would you say we have used so far today? Just name them. You don't have to count. You don't have to. Can anybody think of anything that we've done today that you would qualify as being fun, gameful, anything? Maybe not. It'll be a lot of blank stares.
It was the first activity.
Okay, what about the first activity?
It was kind of fun. It made us think. It made us interact.
Interact. Okay, so we had some social.
Laughing.
We had some fun. We had some laughing. Okay. Anything else? Anything else you can think of we did?
Well, because we had to come up with words, it had some creativity.
Some creativity. Okay. Good.
And there was collaborative because you kind of discussed, it wasn't just social, it was also collaborative.
Okay.
You kind of discussed
Awesome.
what you were going
Yep.
doing.
Yeah.
You had quite a few narrative elements.
Narrative elements. Okay.
It was a story.
Was a story. I told a few of those. Okay. Even most of them that I came up with, I did a rough count of what I thought we would hit by now. And yes, a story and fun. We had a little quiz at the beginning, how do you feel about gamification, got a little audience participation going there. We talked a little bit, and this one was subtle, because I wanted to lead into this later. I had you fill out those cards at the beginning, and you set some goals. Goals are big. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about goals. So you set some goals, what your goal was for me, what you were hoping I would do, and your goals for yourself, what you were anticipating you would do. So goals were in there. Goals were huge in games. That's a game element. Autonomy. And I kind of gave you kind of tried to lead you with that one. When I said choose one of these, the idea of giving them some choice. Games are a series of choices, right? That's what they usually like. Some curiosity, hopefully. Maybe I didn't yet, but I'll work on it. Maybe you're curious why I had you pick a number. Maybe something I said was like, ooh, that was interesting. That was different. So surprise, that sort of thing. A little humor. Hopefully I heard some laughs, so I think we hit the humor. Visuals and aesthetic, right? I have not hopefully killed you with the bullet points, so that's good. So yes, I think all of those would qualify. So again, when we think game, sometimes we get kind of a narrow focus. So I like to get people thinking a little bit broader. All right. Any other thoughts or questions so far? Yes.
I have a thought.
Yes.
Because when we
I like thoughts.
we were sharing are either one or two, right? You maybe do my one. And Melanie had described her favorite game, and often when I think of games, I think of board games or video games or something like that. But what Melanie described was softball. And I think that these kinesthetic games where you're actually in the real world playing softball or soccer, that kind of gets left out of the gamification.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that's why I left those notes place. I was very vague. Game. Didn't say what kind of game. Could have been a thought experiment. Could have been, I don't know. It could be whatever you consider to be a game. And that's right. I'm glad somebody came with a sports kind of thing. I love that because some of them are physical, some of them are, and there's certainly nothing wrong with. Sorry.
The game isn't
It is, yeah.
Anymore.
Yeah. So that's why I'm glad I don't have to nobody comes and yells at me because I violated the definitional.
Tyranny of precision.
I know. That's the one thing she's going to remember. That is the one thing she's going to remember. But that's okay. You know what? Because it opens up something to say. It was a little provocative. Okay, that's okay. And that's why I include some of these things. It's fine. It's fine to argue with me, disagree with me, whatever. And let's see. Because there are 12 sides to.
Is it critical thinking, challenging authority?
Let's hope so.
I feel like if authority cannot take a challenge, then it should be overthrown.
Yes. I did not bring my mask today. And it's not quite, see, you should have scheduled me for next week.
Yeah.
Remember.
Yeah.
I think coming this evening. Can take a challenge.
Remember.
Or not take it.
All right. I love the fact that there's all these obscure references in these guys. Anyway, okay. Although, I gotta say, in that movie, Natalie Portman's accent really annoyed me, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. But anyway, so. All right.
Fill the rest of this in on what you're talking
Sorry.
about.
Remember Guy Fawkes Day, V for Vendetta, the movie, which was all tied in, and he wore the anonymous mask. So we kind of, in 42, of course, was from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It is the universal answer. And I think we covered those are the two main ones in the law.
Yes.
They also mentioned something about a TV show. I don't watch TV, so I have no idea what she was talking about.
Yeah, I knew, but I never watched that TV show. I know
What?
you're talking about.
The TV
I
show?
don't know, they said something about like Jimmy or something. Or
It was a very old TV show. It was one of the, it was like,
That was a long time.
it was one of the most famous. It was so I didn't watch it.
Yeah,
I didn't
that was
watch
more
it.
that's out of the answer.
Yeah.
that was
I didn't watch it either, but I remember that being
That was
big
a
cliffhanger.
I remember the music thing.
Yeah.
It's like nowadays, it's who's gonna die next in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering if that was the reference.
Is John Snow still alive? It would probably be
Yeah,
really close.
that was.
that was a
close.
good one, yes.
Yeah. So pick your cliffhanger. Yeah. All right. So, I have a quick story to tell you. This gets to the heart of why the class today was called Beyond Points, Badges, and Leaderboards. So if you came here hoping I was going to teach you how to build a perfect leaderboard, I'm not going to, but I'll tell you a story. It's called the Gamified Goose.
Yes.
This is why there's a goose on here, on the flyer. Just so I can tell this story. It's a fractured fable. And that's a very old reference. It's before my time even, but if anybody ever watched the old reruns of the Bullwinkle cartoon, and they had the fractured fairy tales. So this is a fractured fable. Anyway, so once upon a time, because that's how all good stories start. There was a farmer. Okay, he came from the big city and he moved out, bought himself some land, and he called it the Quick Fix. There was also another farmer, and he'd been out there for generations probably, and his ranch was called the Engage a Lot. Now, these two farmers, they both used to go into town to the same general store, and the general store keeper had his book sitting up on the counter one day. And he said, you know, they're both looking at it, and what is this? And he said, I don't know, but you know, the town next door, they said that they had copies and that people liked it, so I figured I'd put a couple out here, and if anybody wanted them, they could have them. So each of the farmers take a copy of the book, because they have geese, and they want to figure out how to gamify their geese, so they take the book home. So now the first farmer, at the quick fix, he goes about his day, and at the end of the day, he goes, well, you know, I should look at that book. So he sits down, he opens up the book, and reads the first chapter. Okay, and in the first chapter, he finds out that if he adds points, badges, and leaderboards to the feed that he gives to his geese, they are going to magically, you know, be better. They're going to be bigger and stronger, and they're going to lay more eggs and all this great stuff. So he goes out and he starts pouring points, badges, and leaderboards into the feed every day and feeding it to the geese. And sure enough, one day he goes out and the goose has laid a golden egg. So he is thrilled, right? Yay, okay. And every day he goes out and there are more eggs. So he's thrilled. This is great. He has found the answer, right? So he's like, cha-ching. Okay, I got myself a goose, I got golden eggs, it's all good. Great. Then he goes out one day, there's no egg. And he's like, shaking goose. There's no egg. What happened? And the goose is like, oops. So now he's mad. Now he's pissed off. Dollar signs have changed to expletives, and he's like, get out of here, you are a stupid goose, get off my property. Because this is a very family-friendly story, we're not going to kill the goose. So the goose just gets banished to hit the road. So goose leaves, wanders down the road, and finds, which my clicker is just a little happy today, finds the other farmer down at the engage a lot. And he looks around and goes, see what they got going on here. Well, at Engage a Lot, he has a beautiful daughter who encouraged him to not just read the first chapter. She said, no, Dad, I think you really got to look a little bit further. You got to learn a little more. I don't think what they're doing down there at Quick Fix is working. So they got into using some other things besides the points, badges, and leaderboards. And now they said, you know, the points, badges, and leaderboards, they work just like she happens to work at Starbucks. It's like coffee, right? You have a cup of coffee, and it wakes you up for a little while, and you're good to go, and you're like, and then what happens?
Are we to take a break soon so I can
We
be
are.
filming?
We are. I work this all together, see? Because I know as soon as I say coffee, people go, yeah, I want coffee. Almost the end of the story, and then you can.
Okay, sorry.
No. I love the timing of that. That was perfect. So anyway, but the coffee is like the points, badges, and leaderboards. That's the whole point. You might get this initial sort of, hey, it's different. My teacher's doing something different. This is cool. I'm gonna participate. I'm happy. But then when they figure out it's just the same stuff, you just stuck some pictures of badges on top of it. They go back to being the same boring thing they were before. So the goose was like, I don't know, I'm gonna try this out. I'm not sure how I feel about this. But the good news was, because they didn't stick to just the points, badges, and leaderboards, everybody was happy. And all the gooses started laying all kinds of beautiful eggs. And in the end, they all lived happily ever after. And now, my question, I had my second poll, and my question was, how are we doing? And I'm going to say that there's going to be some number 4s. So let's take a quick break.